my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Loki, the series premiere, episode 1? Stick around and find out. Hey, I'm Peter. What the crap is wrong with me? Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Loki, the series premiere, episode 1. The synopsis on IMDb reads, "The mercurial villain Loki resumes his role as the god of mischief in a new series that takes place after the events of Avengers Endgame. Loki, the god of mischief, finds himself out of time and in an unusual place and forced against his godly disposition to cooperate with others." So what is this thing? What does it feel like? We've discovered that eventually Marvel can get around to exploring different tones other than kind of the same tone they were locked into for a while. As we got closer and closer to Infinity War, and then of course Endgame, frankly, as the Russo brothers more and more, we're making movies, and then other movies in the series seem to be taking cues from that. We saw some weightiness in the emotions that could be experienced in a lot of these Marvel movies that we hadn't seen since, the first Iron Man movie. So, you'd be right to question, well, what does this thing feel like? And it's really a nice mix of tones, I think. Loki, who escaped during the events of Avengers Endgame, what the crap, it's uncut, dang it. I should have checked my whatever. Can't do it now. It's uncut! And whoever's calling me, stop calling me! I'm doing uncut things! My gosh. I don't have time to edit these videos. I don't have time. The whole uncut shtick, let me just take a little break and tell you about the uncut shtick. The whole reason for that is because I'm madly trying to spin a ton of different plates, and I have to take shortcuts where I can. And so from the very beginning I said, well, I'll just do uncut reviews, I'll call them uncut, I'll make a thing out of it, and hopefully people will be okay with that, because that's just how it has to be. I have time to edit some other things, but I have to cut corners where I can, and I am cutting corners here! It's going to go off again. Sorry. Anyway, so he's, after the events of Avengers Endgame, he's captured by a strange organization that's overseeing all of time. They attempt to recruit him, but first, in this episode, they're interrogating him. There's an agent that specifically is kind of interrogating him, trying to understand what drives Loki, what makes him tick, to see if he can be trusted and useful to them. The episode has action and has comedy throughout, as Loki tries to get away, as he's, butting heads with different strong personalities, but it's largely, well, structurally, I don't want to say in terms of like the money thrown at it. It's kind of like a big budget clip show, because they're playing clips. They're doing cool things and making them into holograms and stuff, and so it doesn't look cheap. They're not literally just cutting away to footage of old movies he's been in, but they are revisiting those key moments from the movies that he's been in up to this point. Revisiting his past, recontextualizing his character, and kind of trying to show us by the end of this episode, okay, in all that stuff was going on, but who's the real Loki that's always been underneath all of that? That's what this episode is trying to do, and I think by the end, it does accomplish that. Now, Loki has deceived us so many times as moviegoers. Tom Hiddleston will go for these really dramatic moments in the previous movies that when you watch it the first time, at least for me, I'm like, I believe this character. And then he'll, pull another fast one. But then you'll sometimes also learn that there was some truth in what Loki was feeling there. It wasn't all a lie, and so Loki's very complex in terms of how much honesty is he really expressing in a given moment. And I think by the end of this moment, we are meant as audiences to accept the truth that we are seeing the real Loki at the end here, that he's not pulling a fast one. I think a lot of this episode is spent kind of depowering Loki, showing that he is not in a position of power. There is no hope for him to kind of like climb up this organization and gain power over this organization, because his very motivations for gaining power are questioned and explored. And so they are kind of doing some retconning of his character, but in a way that you can see working with what has come before. Or if you just kind of like don't go back maybe and watch those movies fresh right now, you can more easily accept and say, yeah, I can believe that this is kind of who was underneath this character all along, you know. So anyway, they're recontextualizing his character. They're trying to create a consistent and sympathetic personality, I think, that we can potentially root for, despite the fact that Loki has murdered and caused almost immeasurable destruction. And they show some of those clips to remind us, you know, as if there's maybe an elephant in the room of like, yeah, remember when he like gouged that dude's eyeballs out? And remember when he stabbed and killed Coulson? You know, I mean, these things happened. And so it acknowledges these really kind of contrasting parts of his character, because he really became more of a straight and mischievous and fairly harmless character as the series went on, despite his very menacing and brutal beginnings. And so they're really trying to acknowledge all these different things and create something consistent here. And I think at the end, maybe there is a little bit of stretching, but I'm willing to go along with them, I think, because of all the work they put in and just the performance that Tom Hiddleston gives. So yeah, it's an exploration of his character while bouncing his personality off of the unflappable Agent Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, who is a great, I guess, foil is the expression you would maybe use. As much humor as there is, that exploration of Loki's character also deals, you know, with, as I said, the darkness of some of his past deeds and the tragic inner values that have driven him up to this point as we kind of learn more about them. By the last 10 minutes, there is some legit human drama, and the show, I think, has a spectrum of emotions that feel earned by the character's reflections on his history. It is, however, a show, I think, for fans that are already deeply invested in the MCU, as has been the case with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, as far as the cast goes, I've already talked briefly about Tom Hiddleston. He brings back the range that he has displayed as Loki, both as a humorous and mischievous villain, as well as moments of emotional vulnerability, which we have seen him, particularly I think in the Thor movies, display before. By the end of this episode, I'm willing to believe that we're finally getting to know the real Loki. And despite the kind of like illogic of liking a murderer, in this particular fictional and tonal context of the MCU, and that's important, I think, to mention that the tonal context of the MCU, I don't think we have to feel morally obligated to kind of like emotionally hold Loki accountable for these murders. You know, it is fiction at the end of the day, and I think there are some. That's kind of like almost a philosophical conversation about the nature of fiction and tone and what that can mean for moral issues in the script and stuff like that. I don't need to get into all that right now. But anyway, I do feel ready to root for him and care about him because of how tonally this franchise has been handled. Even though logistically speaking, he has committed these deeds, we should still be feeling a certain way about him, where we would if he was a real person. We would not be able to just feel chummy and root for him now, you know. But in this fictional tonal context, it works for me to care about him and to root for him right now. Owen Wilson is also a perfect counter to Loki. He's so casually and obviously in control, and Loki has this death grip on the idea of ruling everyone. And, you know, that and Wilson's performance just gave me several good chuckles at the contrast between the characters that I thought were wonderfully performed by both. And that's as a side note, going back to the script and stuff, character-driven humor is what works for me in the MCU. It fails for me when they're just handing out snarky punchlines to whoever, and, you know, as if anybody could, you know, have any line, you know, anybody could be doing punchlines. But when you have a character like Spider-Man or Iron Man or Loki, or now in this case Agent Mobius, who are making jokes that are saying things that are funny, that are an outgrowth of their character, then I actually find that I find that funny. Rather than just kind of generic one-liners. And so this humor is working for me in many cases. As far as the stunts and visuals, it's not quite movie quality as far as the MCU comparison would go, but I would say that only if I'm being critical. I think the effects are great for all that it's aiming to do. I think it matches the same bar as WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Possibly. There are themes of free will and maybe more self-perception. Loki hates this time-governing organization has this right path in mind that he has to stick to. And you might think to yourself, although maybe there's a parallel there between us and God's will, but I don't think that is the easiest parallel to make. Loki has this grand purpose in mind for himself, and it's his view of himself that is greatly challenged in this episode. I don't think that the episode is going to really force or naturally draw a lot of viewers to confront anything deep in themselves. Certainly not like their purpose compared to God's purpose for us. But I think there is, if we want to use it, a springboard for asking whether or not our view of ourselves is realistic and based on the truth, or is it rather what we would like to be true of ourselves? All right, so I have no idea what your tastes are in TV shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter. Okay, skip this one for now, but plan to watch it all when you have enough content on Disney Plus that you want to watch finally, to just binge it all, watch it all for the first time in 1 month. $8 now is what it's running for. It'd be worth it to binge and watch WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier for the first time, probably while you're playing video games with those. But this one, combined with a fairly casual interest in watching those just to stay up with the MCU, this one looks like it might be something that you'll want to give your full attention to the viewing experience as you sit down and watch it. But again, wait until the season is done. This one is rated TV-14 for violence. And those are about all my thoughts for now on the premiere of Loki on Disney Plus. Let's see here. Right now, I'd like to take some time. Let me bring the microphone over here. We're going to have a little hushed kind of lullaby experience. To write a tune for pre-made rhyme. The lyrics kind of never change, but the melody gets rearranged. I never know what I'll create to say how much I appreciate Gabriel Stinson, Brian Franklin, Olin D. Branham, the Cellcast, Drew, Rob, Winston, Crutchfield, Lee Bray, J.D. Myers, and Matthew Ridgway. Thank you for supporting me and SBP and CGC. This reminds me of that old Skull Monkeys song about the bonus room. Look that up, Skull Monkeys bonus room. You won't regret doing it. And now to all who hear this tune, thank you as well. Please come back soon. Want to hear your name in song? Then check out our page on Patreon. All right. Those are my thoughts. Would love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell if you think you can stand some more of this stuff. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get more info about all the benefits of becoming an insider over at patreon.com/spiritblade productions. Then, of course, I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.